Well, good morning. Good morning. Whew, gonna make me work. I could. Is this even working? Good morning. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? This seems a little. You can hear me? Oh, I see thumbs up back there. How about Nate, Ed? Can you guys hear me? You can. Oh, good. Okay. You were just ignoring me then. That makes me feel so good. Patrick, I know you can hear me. You just ignore me. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome you back to spring of 2018. We got if I put my back to you guys, I'm really sorry. This is one of those rooms that you have to kind of I could get a little dizzy in here. So holler at me if my back is to you the whole time. Really just thrilled to welcome you all back. It sounds like everybody had a nice break. Yes? Some of you didn't have much of a break. You know, it's an odd time of year. It's crazy busy. I don't know about you guys. We flew out east and then rented a car and drove all over creation and slept on floors and had a great time seeing family. But we were so happy to get back to Minnesota. I cannot tell you. And the weather here is far better than it is anywhere that we ever were. So we're really happy to be back. But it's such a crazy, nutso time of year. It is wonderful weather. It really is. It is a crazy time of year, and I think it's a stressful time of year for a lot of people. But I think one of the best things about it is somehow over the holidays, I hope that we find time to spend time with those that are most important to us and doing things that are most important to us. And that doesn't always happen perfectly, but hopefully you found that spot and could spend time there. I think in the new year, I don't know about in your household, but my family, we're not much partiers, so I go to bed at like 10 o'clock. It's really hard to participate in New Year's Eve, but I was up. I stayed up. I did. That was pretty good. I did not know that when you live in Central Standard Time, the ball drops at 11 o'clock. So I stayed up and then missed the ball anyway. I'm not sure how that happened. It's always a little anticlimactic. But I think the best part about New Year's is that ability to, again, think about really what's important to us. You know, we have all these things that go on in our lives, personal, professional, community, tons of things. And there's no one in this room who isn't extremely busy. But my hope is that on New Year's, you really think about what's most important to you. Some of you translate that into resolutions, and others do not. But to me, it's all about really what's going to anchor us and what's most important. So in that theme, today I wanted to talk a little bit about our fiscal year 18 priorities, literally for 30 seconds. Because that's all the stuff we're doing, all the great stuff we're doing that we should be really proud of. But I want to focus on what I think is really the most important work that we do, that's foundational to everything, and take an opportunity to do some celebration, again, in the spirit of the new year, and then finally take a look at just a few of our resolutions that we'll be working on. So I'm excited about it. So these are our fiscal year 18 priorities. When we first showed these to you in fall, it was 2017, and we talked about them as fiscal year 18 priorities because that's our fiscal year. Here we are in 2018 now. I won't go through all these. If you would like details about them, you can just let us know. There's a lot of information on SharePoint. I can promise you that all of these strategies, student success, strategic planning, new programs, enrollment, revenue generation, accreditation, and legislative support are all moving along, and we're in a good place. They are all really important initiatives, and we could talk about each of them for a long, long time. But again, thinking about what I think is really most important, I'd like to kind of narrow it down. Many times I'm asked, it's usually when I'm in a weird place, like in the line at the grocery store or at the brewery or something like that. Not that I spend too much time at a brewery, but you know what I mean. So people say to me, Hera, you know, what do you think the college really has to accomplish in the next few years? What do you want people to say? Boy, that college does this really, really well. What are those things that you hope the college accomplishes? So I think a lot about it. I usually give some stupid answer in the line at the grocery store as I'm looking for my debit card. But it gives me this prompt to think about things. And I think there are three things that I am always thinking about. Two of them we've talked about before, and one we've not talked a lot in a public form about, but it's been part of many of our smaller conversations. Number one, to me, beyond all else, is the culture we're trying to create here. We began that conversation in fall of 16 when you told me about the culture you wanted to create. And we've been working on that culture, and I'll show you kind of where we've ended up. Keep in mind that this work will never be done, but I believe that a college absolutely cannot achieve what we want it to achieve unless it's a culture where people want to be, where you feel like you have the support you need, where you have your voice, where you're valued. That culture is everything. And I know a lot of colleges that haven't established that culture. They're not bad places, but they will not achieve what they could. So it is foundationally important, and we will never stop working on that. Number one being culture. Number two is a focus on students. Now, there are lots of ways to look at this. You can think of it in terms of student success, and we talk a lot about that. You know, enrollment and retention, and I'll show you how we are doing on some of those things. But it's really a bigger picture. It's this passion that this college community has for doing what's right for students. And you are huge student advocates. So that students and what students need have to always be our beacon without any exception. And that's not always easy to do. It's not, because sometimes you'll come up with something that you want to do but can't, or it's kind of competing needs. It's hard. But to me, that is foundational and number two. And the third one is one that, again, we haven't talked about in this forum, but when I look back at the conversations that we began in fall of 16, it's this concept of innovation, creativity, risk-taking. And what you told me is we want to be free to do really cool things just because they're good for students, and we want our good ideas to be heard, and that's the kind of place we want to be part of. And I agree that when I look at colleges that do amazing things, this being one of them, they're not things that are in a job description usually. They're things where people have gone above and beyond. They've changed something because they want to. It's innovative. It's different. And as a college, we have to embrace that. So to me, those are the foundational things that make everything in the previous slide possible. When we achieve the culture we want, we're always focused on students, and we embrace innovation. And when you say them like that, it seems really easy to do them all. Just check, check, check. You know, that's not how it works. This is what I spend my time thinking about, and I wanted to share that with you. So where are we with all of these things? So in the spirit of the new year, because not only did I miss the ball drop, but that's supposed to be a form of celebration, right? So we have a lot to celebrate. And in a college, as you well know, you never get to the point where you go, oh, we're done. We've developed this number of programs. Our enrollment is here. Our retention is here. Oh, we can sit back and be done. That never happens, and it shouldn't ever happen. And if it does, then we've got a big problem. So we have to celebrate along the way, and you are the ones that told me that. In fall of 16, when we had our focus groups, you said when you talked about the culture that you wanted to create, we need to celebrate the little things that we do because we need that to be rejuvenated and recognized. So in that spirit, on your tables, there are things. There are balloons, and there's some confetti, and there are some, thank you, Steve. And there are noisemakers. I encourage you to use those. So we have much to celebrate in those three themes. The first being culture, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but it's so important that I think every time we come together, we talk about culture. So we started with those focus groups in fall of 16. Then Ken did some focus groups, and he asked you, what is the CLC experience? And you've seen this word cloud like 12 times. And all of those data were handed to the Strategic Planning Committee with the charge of make sure that our values match the culture that you want to create. Because that's what values should do. They should be our kind of set of rules. This is what we value. So we now, after many renditions, have 4 new values. And I think it's quite powerful that the values of this college are community, which can be how we interact with one another and the community at large. That we are truly inclusive and will hold ourselves to that. That we value excellence in its many, many forms, not the least of which is we will never reduce academic rigor, of course. And we value innovation. I see this as tremendous progress. Now, there's plenty of work to do with culture. We will never be done, but we're going to be measuring our progress, and I'll talk about that in just a few minutes. So, You know, culture and the development of culture is not a me thing, it's a you thing. If we've made any progress at all, it's because you have thought about how you interact with one another. You have said the right things to your colleagues. You've gotten to know people's names. You've thanked them for their work. You've recognized them. So thank you for what you've done. It's an us thing, and it has to continue. So thanks for that work. It's the most important thing that I think we do. So give yourselves a round of applause for making a step forward in culture. Somebody squeeze the thing. There you go. See, look at that. All right, thank you. Steve, that was pathetic. Much better, thank you. Okay, so in the realm of student focus, there are a number of things that we could look at. But if we take it down to its most basic form and look at some of our metrics, we do have some things to celebrate. And some of this you've seen before, but let me tell you, it's dangerous if we think that this is commonplace. It's not. So this is our enrollment metric, and I know those of you on the side, you can't see this at all. Can you, Dave? Okay, so you've seen this before. We track, thanks to Wendy. Where's Wendy? Thank you, Wendy. I see your hand. I see no other part. Oh, yeah, there you go. So we track enrollment every year. On the y-axis is our FYEs. On the x is these are census dates. So we sit here about -1. That's not the temperature. Could be, but it's not. This is 1 week before classes start. And then, of course, the years this is just looking at the spring semester of 2012 through 2018. You can see an ongoing trend. We've lost a lot of enrollment, but we walked into this year with a target of being flat, losing no more. And some people, if they heard that, would say, well, gee, that's your goal? No change? The bar is a little low, right? But the bar is not low, because 2 years ago, we lost 10%. Last year, we lost 4%. And to say we will lose no more is huge. I'm here to tell you that as of yesterday, right, Wendy? We are this bright red line. We are hovering at about 0.5% higher than we were at this time last year. And these numbers move a lot. So tomorrow it could be up or down or whatever it is. But our projections are that we will be flat this year. They continue that way. And I know flat is not exciting, but I need you to be excited, because this is your work. This is the recruitment work. This is you reaching out to students. This is all the retention work. This is the calling campaign that's happening right now. This is mobile advising. The list goes on and on. This is not one strategy. It has to be 20 or 30, and you're all part of it. So please give yourselves a big round of applause. Somebody squeeze a thing. What's the thing? Okay, there you go. You weren't kidding, Jody. It's a little loud. She said it's a little loud. Okay. So, whew. I always jump when guns go off. That was a little disconcerting, Jode. Okay, so yes, enrollment is great. And, you know, trust me, next year our target will not be flat. Next year we will be up. And we're going to keep pushing that envelope until we get to a place that we can live. But this is a huge celebration, so thank you. And if we continue to look at some of those other metrics that are about student focus, I wanted to share with you that we've finally settled into tracking 2 metrics. At a system level, the state, Minnesota State, tracks a metric called student success. And as you can see, it's defined as the proportion of students who complete, transfer, or continue to be enrolled. And I'll tell you, I'll be honest, it's a pretty progressive metric, because it recognizes that students like me, who were in colleges but then left and transferred someone else, aren't failures. You know, if you transfer, then you can be considered successful. So we track that number of students who have transferred, completed, or are still enrolled, which means that a small part of that really is retention. And retention is just defined as the number of students who are still with us. So a proportion of that student success metric. Now, even though I said that's a pretty progressive metric, it's true, but at a system level, they really only look at full-time students, because that's a standard IPEDS definition that we all know is very false. Many of our students are part-time. So with Wendy's help, well, in Wendy, not her help, she just did it, the whole thing. She pulled it with all students, full and part-time, and we've excluded CIS and PSEO, because their path is not always defined by us, right? And they take different paths. So I want to share with you kind of where we are. This is the only graph I'll put up, I promise. So on this one, on the y-axis is percentage of students. And the X is the entering cohort. So these are students who entered in fall of 2011 all the way through last fall. And then the percentage of those on the red line that either in 1 year had transferred, completed, or were still enrolled. And the blue line is retention, and that's just the raw, how many of those were still with us. So a couple of things to take home. One, take a look at the difference in this last year. So the students who came in fall of 15, when we looked at the number in fall of 16, how many of them were still with us? About 27% were still with us, but a whole lot more had transferred or completed. And if we expand that to the success measure, about 61% had done one of those three things. If you look at that compared to the system, we are not at the bottom, but we're in the bottom half. So we knew we could do better than that. This year, students who came in fall of 16, and Wendy looked to see if they were still here in fall of 17, or had completed, or had transferred. The success number went up from 61% to 68%, which I cannot tell you is a huge increase. And when we ask the question, how much of that is due to retention, and we focus on retention because we think that's the thing that we have the most impact on. The interactions with students, the programs you put in place, the outreach, that personalization of the education that we provide, we know that it can remove that retention number. Increase from 27% to 33%. These don't look huge, but I'll tell you, to give you a point of reference, at my last college, we targeted a 2% increase in retention, and we were told you can't do it. Not in 1 year, there's no way. These numbers are huge. And this is your work. This is largely all the things that happen to keep students enrolled, to get them enrolled earlier. Again, back to those calling campaigns and the work that the Student Link is doing and the popcorn and all of those million things is making a huge difference. And it is through retention that the enrollment numbers have flattened. I can promise you that. So these are very closely tied together. Huge, huge celebration here because I would not have dreamed that we could have moved it this far in one year. So again, could go up and down, that's okay, but we now know that the work we're doing is making a difference, and we have to answer that question because you're working really hard. We don't want to spend time doing anything that's a waste of time. We know it's making a difference. So when Wendy dug back down into the data, I think some of the best stories come from the fact that the biggest advances we've made are actually with our at-risk student populations. While full-time students, who are typically the ones that are tracked, we did see an increase in retention. It was modest, about 3%. Our part-time students increased their retention 6%, which is enormous. These are generally considered to be an extremely at-risk population. And I think one of the most exciting things that we found is when we look at our students of color, there's a huge gap in success and retention and completion in every metric when you compare Caucasian students with students of color and American Indian students. And there still remains a gap. I mean, we still have a student success gap. But from a retention standpoint, the students of color, including American Indian students, went up by 14% last year. 14%. And not only that, they came back at a higher rate than did our Caucasian students for the first time ever. That is the work that you're doing in the classroom. That is the diversity committee. That is what's happening in student services. That is athletics. That is TRIO. That is all that work coming together. Now, that work is hard. So next year, it could come back down. But we know we can do it. And it is a huge, huge accomplishment. We want to be the school that really, those at-risk students have a tremendous opportunity, and it's because of the personal connections here. So congratulations. Give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you. That's right. So the other thing I think we have to celebrate is not quantitative at all, and I've had trouble getting my hands around it. It's one of the things that I try to share with you in the emails that I send, which I never know if I'm hitting the right note on those emails, but my goal is to tell you about all the cool things that are happening on this campus, because you're so busy in dental assisting that I don't know if you know what's happening everywhere else, and you could say that about every department. There's a lot of innovation, and these images come only from really right before break. They were posted on social media. Were it not for Jessie, I'd have no pictures. Thank you very much, Jessie. She does a fine job. Yes, she does. So, everything that happens inside and outside the classroom, these are innovative. If you stripped out having juried student art shows, Casey, or if you didn't have our ASL performances, or Steve and many of you didn't take students on these experiences, and the arboriculture class did not go to Crowing Power and really spend some time doing, I don't know what they're doing there, but it involves a chainsaw, so it must be very cool. If we didn't have VIP girls in trades tours, and we weren't doing a cool solar project, and we didn't have students doing rough grouse research, nobody would even know it. They'd say, that's a great school anyway. Right? You don't have to do these things, but you do. And this is a fraction of the work that's happening. This is innovation, and it is something that I fear falls under the radar and we all just take for granted. Of course we do that stuff. That's what makes this place so special. So innovation is something to celebrate, and it doesn't mean we can be complacent. Oh, we do that, so let's not focus on it. But we want to create a place where it's encouraged and it's recognized, and it helps you feel that your ideas are valued. So congratulations on being innovative. And it really is what gets me so excited about the work we do. And when people say, what's different about CLC? I can get that class anywhere. This is the kind of stuff I talk about. I said, you won't get this everywhere. It won't happen. And that I say with great confidence. And if they'll tolerate me keeping them in line for a long time, I can give them lots of examples because you share it with me and Jesse shares it with the world. So thank you. All right, so after all of those opportunities for celebration, what are our resolutions? What are we going to be spending our time this year doing around these three really critical kind of components? First is the culture piece. A couple of things. I think we've all worked hard to know names and treat each other right, etc. We need to take it to the next level and codify what it is that we're trying to achieve. We'll be engaging the community building team with our new lead, Sharon, and we'll be introducing Sharon, but we're very happy to have her here, to develop a philosophy of personal interactions. And I use that term very hesitantly because I don't know what to call it. Not a code of conduct, nothing like that. But when people come to this college, will be valuable if we can say, this is how we treat each other here. And it might be as specific as, we thank people 22 times a day. I hope not. Please don't make that one of our philosophies of, yeah. But it could be very general, like, we're nice. I mean, that's okay. But to put it down and say, this is what we value, this is how we want to treat people. If this is not how you want to treat people, this probably is not a very good fit for you. Now, I wouldn't say it like that, and you know that. But this is one thing that we'll be working on. We're also going to be measuring our progress. You've all seen this emblem for the Great Colleges to Work For survey, which CLC has done, every year for a long time. We did not do it last year. The last one that I saw was spring of 16. And what it tells us is we had some real work to do in our culture. It talks about trust and communication, and do you have what you need to do your job, and is your voice valued? It's not a perfect survey, but I think it's a really good indicator of, are we moving some of these things? And if we're not, then we need to do something different. So we're doing this survey again. Keep in mind that the way the Chronicle of Higher Education administers it, it doesn't go to everyone. It's a random selection that we have no control over. But if you are one of the people this spring, Wendy, when will it go out? Do you know? February, March. If you're one of those people, please fill it out, honestly. We need to know if we're moving the needle. And I promise you in this room that we will share those data, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there are always some ugly in that survey, and we will talk about what we need to do. So we're going to keep pushing on culture. We will never be done with that work. We're going to keep pushing on the student focus, as you well know, by making a couple of investments in both recruitment and retention. The Student Success Committee has been thinking about strategies that we need to engage in, and they started with some pretty low-hanging fruit because, well, we didn't have any money, and we still don't have a lot of money, but we're getting to the point where we know that we can invest. So that committee is going to help us with Joy figure out what we need to invest in to take retention and completion to the next level. So you'll see investments there. And we're going to invest in recruitment because I mentioned to you that our enrollment gains come from our retention gains. That's very true. If you today took a snapshot and asked, how many students do we have that are returning registered as compared to last year? we have many more returning students registered today. That's your retention effort. But if you looked at the number of brand new students, we're down significantly. So the work that all of you, Student Services, Tambra, wherever Tambra is, Tambra here? There's Tambra, has been doing, is huge. The number of student prospects is up. The follow-up is really, it's amazing, doing a great job. And we're going to see that bear fruit in the fall. But we know that people are spread really thin. So we are going to be hiring another recruiter, probably a 0.75, that is focused largely on technical programs. This came from you. That's right. That's a good thing, isn't it? And this does not mean that the work that Tambra does with technical programs will stop. She's doing some fabulous work. It just means that we can really leverage that work and make sure that technical programs and liberal arts work is happening, because we need to build both of those. So you're going to see an investment there as well, and we're excited about it. We're going to apply for the HLC Academy in completion and persistence. As part of our reaffirmation of accreditation, we have to have a quality initiative, something that takes us to the next level. And participating in this academy is in line with what we're trying to achieve: retention, completion, student success. And it meets that goal. So we'll be applying for that academy. And then finally, in the realm of creativity and innovation, I think you'll see more and more new projects and new programs being discussed and a plan being developed. Joy's going to talk to you soon about developing new programs. We know that to attract new students and to be very responsive to the community, we have to develop new programs. So that will be happening. And you're going to see lots of new projects. You've already seen some, like our amazing Raider Athletics project and the fabulous Dryden Theater project. We're doing a great solar project. So you're going to see a lot of these things that may be different. Feel free to ask about them. We'll be as transparent as we possibly can, and feel free to call us on it if you don't think we're doing the right thing. But we're excited about those projects. And then finally, as our enrollment grows, we're very committed to developing a pot of funds, of strategic initiative funds, that will allow us to take advantage of some of these fabulous ideas and say, yeah, we could make that investment because we've put some money aside to be able to do that if it's in line with these major priorities, our strategic plan, if it's best for students. So these are the things that I am really excited about making good progress on. There is no question in my mind that we have the right group of people to do this work. I appreciate all the input that you provide. I continue to get phone calls occasionally. You can always call me. You know that, right? You can always call. People don't call me. Nobody calls me. But feel free to call me. I get emails. I get a comment box. Every once in a while, something will show up in my actual mailbox. And when I ask for input, we get it, which is a wonderful thing. So please know that this is our college. I think we're doing fabulous things. We're really excited about 2018 and beyond. And as always, thank you very, very much for all the work you do. You are Central Lakes College. Thank you. That's right. Oh. I was trying to get Jody, but it went like 3 feet. Okay, I think next up is Kari. She seems to be getting up, so that's a good thing.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the almost start of spring semester, right? Can I switch to this other microphone? Or I'll try this. All right, I just have a couple of updates this morning, and so we're going to see if this works. Here we go. We're going to continue the theme of student success. I thought it would be good to remind everyone about our two facility bonding projects that we have. The legislature, again, starts a meeting here in January, and we have two projects, or we have a primary project and then some of our HEPA projects that will go in front of the legislature. So the first is our Brainerd Student Services and Academic Support project. We've been talking about this for some time. We're asking for planning money so that we can continue to plan and develop this project. I've put the project scope up here, again, focused on student services and academic support, looking at the Learning Commons in the library, Student Life Center, including fitness and expanded weight room, and then remodeling the locker rooms. I'm not going to go into all of those details. We've talked about that. But again, as we look at what the needs are for our institution, this has come forward as a high priority. And so would encourage you, as you see your legislators around town and possibly even on campus, encourage their support of these projects for us, because they really are critical and are really focused on student success. We did hear over the break, I think through Hera, that we may have another bonding visit, potentially. If you'll remember, we had one right in the middle of fall in-service day, and then I think the Senate was put on hold. So we may have another visit looking at these projects, and if so, we'll probably be reaching out to the college community again as well. Oh, this is okay. Thank you. Thanks, Darren. And, whoops. I'm not used to managing these pieces. Okay, HEPA requests. This is more of a, we're going to take care of what we have. But again, as you look at this, we've got 3 projects, about $7.5 million in HEPA requests. Again, taking care of the facilities that we have. Roof and HVAC replacement on both Brainerd and Staples campuses, and then the roof replacement here on the west end of the building. So again, just important pieces. And then I'm going to shift just a little bit, but again, focused on student success, to talk a little bit about bookstore charging. If you'll remember, fall semester, there were some questions that came up at Town Hall in a variety of settings about when students can charge. So we just wanted to address that. And so I met with our staff and really just wanted to share some important information and then ask for your help. So for bookstore charging, approximately 85% of our students charge books and materials to their financial aid. Students can charge unless they're in jeopardy of being dropped from class, which is a very small percentage. So if in doubt, just send them to the bookstore and see if they can charge. Students can charge through the first week of the semester. So Friday, January 12th, students can charge. We started charging in December, and that goes through the first week of the semester. So again, encourage your students to come forward. This is where we need some help. We hear from students that sometimes they're being told, well, we don't need those supplies or those materials or those books until mid-semester or maybe even the end of the semester. If that's the case, please encourage your students to get the books or materials by the end of that first week of the semester, because if they don't, then that's going to come out of their pocket, and that really can be a hardship for students. So regardless of when they're going to use it in the semester, please encourage them to come and get those materials. Likewise, if you're communicating with your students about materials in your class, can you copy the bookstore staff? Let them know what you're telling students, because when students come into the bookstore, they assume that we know what you know as faculty, and we want to be prepared to help those students. So communication is really key. Another piece, we have a lot of students that are funded by third parties, or they may be PSEO students that can charge their books and materials to their account. If you have materials, they need to be available through the bookstore so students can charge them. If they have to get them from a third party, then they don't have the ability to charge the books, and then it comes out of their pocket. So please make sure that we have in the bookstore what you're telling your students you need, that they could be charging to their bookstore account. And then just a note that PSEO and third-party students they cannot charge optional materials. So if you list something as required, then a third-party funding agency will allow that student to charge it, but if it's optional, they are not allowed to charge. So how you structure the required books and materials is really important for students. And then last, I said we'd need your help. Please talk to your students during that first week of the semester and see if they have their books and materials. Remind them that they can come to the bookstore and charge that first week of the semester. We're doing everything we can to make sure that we've got things on the shelf for the students. But would just ask that you communicate with your students and encourage them to come down, because to the degree that the students have those books and materials in hand really correlates with student success, and that's what we're all here for. So we would appreciate that help. And then lastly, I just have a couple of very quick updates. We talked quite a bit fall semester about Marketplace, or this e-procurement training. We're slowing things down a bit. There's been some hiccups, and so we're going to hold off on any training until February, so that the system can work on some improvements, and we'll get some additional training for our business office staff before we roll it out to the broader community. Reminder that fiscal 19 budgets are due Thursday, January 25th, and I believe faculty have time tomorrow in their divisions to work on those budgets. So I think that's just a great thing, where people can come together and work as departments. And then a couple reminders. These have come out on email, but just since I have you in person, we have a new special expense form that was sent out. Leon, in his great form, has made it a writable document, which is really helpful. So that's available out on SharePoint. And then as a result of some IRS audits and that type of thing, if you're going to be writing contracts of any kind with individuals, we need your help thinking through in advance of making any commitments whether we could bring someone on a contract status or whether it needs to go through payroll. So fill out the quick form, send it forward, and I'll work with HR, and we'll get back to you on that piece of it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joy. Have a wonderful semester.
Well, welcome back, everyone. I am excited that you're all back on campus, and I hope you had a great holiday. I'm going to give a few updates with students' affairs and academic affairs. First, with student affairs, I do really want to talk about and celebrate all the retention efforts going on campus. When I walk through the building and I see just students and faculty or students and anyone on campus that works here connecting with students, taking the time to listen to our students, really making that extra effort to hear what problems the students are having, but then also coming up with multiple ideas on how to work with them so they can be successful. Everything that is going on this campus is really making a difference to our students. So in student affairs, we are very excited that we had a small amount of money left in our access and opportunity budget, and we were able to put 20% towards a retention specialist. So it's just a little bit of money, but we really want to help, and we want to keep the efforts going strong that we've already accomplished. And so that the new 20% retention specialist, what they'll be doing is working with our underrepresented students across the campus and just helping them, meeting with them, helping them to be successful and dealing with their life issues. So that is something that is starting the spring semester. Also, right now, Hera talked about the calling campaign that's going on. We also have a registration event coming up tomorrow. So we're still welcoming new students on that will begin in spring semester. And because of you, we always try to hear feedback, and people came to us with ideas during fall semester on ideas how to change how we register students for CIS for year-long courses and also farm business management. And because of the ideas that came forward, and then we checked with faculty, we checked with the business office, we checked with Wendy, would these ideas work? Does it make it better for people who are actually doing the work, inputting the data on a day-to-day basis, and is it better for a student? And the answer to all of those was yes. So we are able for next year to make select changes in how we register year-long CIS students, and then also the farm business management students. That will not only make it easier for our faculty, but everybody who's working on campus. So keep the ideas coming. We are always willing to look at them and vet them and get feedback about them before moving forward. Also, the enrollment management team, we had a long-term enrollment management plan. This year, we just wanted to focus on an annual plan that directly worked with the goals that we had. And then once our strategic plan, mission, and vision is done, we'll start a 3 to 5 year plan. But this year we wanted all of our division plans and the enrollment management plans to align so we can all be working on the same things together at the same time. And collectively as a dean group, we've been working, many of us were new, I'm new, so we're taking some time through this year. We're meeting monthly, not only to make our team stronger and learn about each other's strengths, but we're also training on each month on different topics, on data, how to utilize data. So we're excited about that. And we're excited to work together as a team, and we're really striving to be good listeners, to bring our ideas out, to get feedback, and also just to have conversations every day, just to keep in touch with what's going on, maybe the struggles that you're feeling, and how we can help support you in your positions. In student affairs, I also wanted to talk about, in about 12 days, there's a new chat feature coming, and why we're excited about this is it's free. That would be one great thing. It expands our service times so we can be open on the weekends and later into the day. And what that is the call center. And so our students, when they call in, if there's not someone here, people at the call center through Minnesota State will be answering students' questions. And if there's questions, very general questions about the college, if there's questions they can't answer, we've identified key people on campus that those questions will be routed to and will be answered when they are back on campus the next day. So we're really excited about that. Paul and team and IT have been working on that launch, and it will be launched on the 11th day of the semester because we don't want to hurt all of our normal functions, and sometimes it can cause confusion during a busy time, so we're just waiting till after our registration and drop ad period.
Joy?
Yeah.
Where is the call center located at?
I think they're in Perham. And we are one of 6, is it 6 colleges, Paul? That is launching this, and so they're answering questions for other colleges. And one thing that we're excited, we don't have to train people because they already know our systems, they know ISRS, they know our websites because they are already functioning as a help desk for all the campuses, so they know a lot of information already. Also, for the annual HLC conference, we are excited that Bruce and Alita, our new assessment coordinators for next year, will be joining us, and so we'll get to work together as a team, so we look forward to that in April. And then I want to talk a little bit about academic analysis. So this year, typically that happens in the fall or the spring, and this year with me being new, it got off to a little late start. So we're not calling it academic analysis this year, and because I'm still learning, what we're asking the deans to do, we have a template of data that we've taken from your profiles, which is around enrollment trends, retention trends, indirect costs of the program, and the deans are collecting the data and they're listing highlights and opportunities for the subject areas, programs, or departments. And at the end of January, they are going to present to the other deans, the exec team, anyone else who's interested in coming. They'll present any concerns or highlights from each of the programs. And really, this is why we're asking if people want to come, because we believe the more people who know if there's a concern or highlights from other areas, really, people can learn from that, and all of us working together, we can help each other, whether it's through ideas or different initiatives. And so that will be a very open process. If there are concerns, what we're going to do with the concerns is the deans and I will work with the faculty, the program, or the department. We're going to bring them together with enrollment services and marketing. And we're going to all work together to try to support those programs and come up with ideas that everybody agrees, might move, or just different things we have to work on. And we're focused on how to having stable programs that are healthy and looking forward. And so each of those programs, if there are concerns, they may need time to work on those things or time to research ideas. So we want to give that time and support. So really we're starting with the dean's update, and then we'll be communicating to the different programs, both good and bad. You know, we want to acknowledge all the good work that's being done too across the campus. We'll also be bringing a summary to AASC because I think it's important to share and have information so other programs can support each other, other faculty can bring ideas to each other, other programs can know. I mean, it's important for our marketing and enrollment services to know if there's areas of concerns or highlights, because then we can all work together to help. And then we'll work with the programs to develop action plans. I mean, there might be a lot of opportunities, but the faculty at US faculty might say, you know, I don't think those 4 things will work with my programs, and that's fine. Let's look at the things that you think will work, and we want to help you support those as you put those in place. So that's how we're going to look at academic analysis this year. And if there are things along the way that that you're not comfortable with how it's being rolled out, please give us feedback, because we can adapt, you know, and change the process as we go and be flexible with it and make it better for next year for everyone. So I'm going to hand, did anyone have any questions about that before we go forward?
Do you know what your analysis, I mean, do you have analysis ideas in terms of already for what the deans are going to present at the end of this month?
I can send out a template of the information that we're collecting, and it's really data from the profile.
Okay, you have to know historically we were targets of performance indicators with red lights, yellow lights,
And I can,
green lights, and we could never recreate the data that was shared with
Okay.
us as faculty.
and so I will send that out to all faculty today. This is not a green light, red light, yellow. This is about sharing information and supporting each other. And
Seriously, what Sandra just alluded to was pure health.
yeah.
Pure health. And made no damn sense.
And so, yes, I'll be happy to share the information today. I'll send out the template, but really it is data right from your program profile. And this is
And then do you have, but then you have those like benchmarks, like 75% capacity. I mean, do you have things that you're looking for
Yeah.
already as what that should look like?
and really,
That also came at us as a big surprise. You know, we weren't
Oh.
going to have this. But, well, thanks for letting us know, you know, after the fact. So that's, do we have that?
yeah.
What?
And s-
I see Dean's presentation this month, I'm like, whoa. Did you, wanting information on what, you know, how you said.
Yep. And so right now, just so you know, we don't have indicators of what concerns mean. And so that is a work in process. As the deans present, really it's a highlight, it's a learning process for me to learn more about the programs. You know, I would say out of the indicators, and these, like I said, haven't been defined yet, but let's say the enrollment trend for 10 years has been down. Maybe the retention has been declining. But the focus is, so let's say it's an area concern. It's not. It's about how can we help you get better and work collectively as a team. Does that make sense? And that's what I want this to be. This is to benefit all of our programs, to stabilize them, so we can all have healthy programs in our divisions. Does that help? Any other questions? Good questions. Thank you. Okay, I am going to turn this over. I am excited that Sharon Moore will be joining our campus. Well, she has already joined as of yesterday, and so she will be our next presenter.
Welcome, Sharon.
I am really excited to be here. It is my second day. Yesterday, I spent most of my day working on technology and learning how all of that works. Several of you came up to introduce yourself to me. Thank you very much for that. I really feel very welcomed. And one of the things you need to know is that the president was talking about the importance of building that culture, and you guys have an amazing culture already. I truly felt from the moment that I walked into this building back in October, you care about each other, and you can see it in the way you talk to each other, the way you talk to me about the college. And probably the most important thing was when I met with Hera in October, because I couldn't remember where we were meeting for lunch. We ended up here in the cafeteria, and I was just amazed at the vibrancy of what was going on here. And I've been at a lot of campuses, and so it's not that way everywhere. And you guys need to know that what you have here is very special. And I think what Hera wants to do is build on that. And employee engagement, you know, comes in very different shapes and forms. And so you don't always have to be, you know, the rah-rah booster stuff to be engaged. And hopefully I can get to know most, if not all of you, so that I can find out how you guys want to be engaged. What activities, what things really make you excited. But I think the main reason I'm here really is to welcome all new employees. So one of them was me, and then I got to hang out with Robert and Kevin yesterday morning while we were going through that orientation. But because I'm so new, I'm not necessarily going to know everybody that may have started in the last few months. So if you're new, just come on up here so that everybody can see you. Come on. And if you just want to say your name and the department that you're working in.
Hi, I'm Kevin, and I am a Upward Bound advisor in the TRIO department.
I'm Robert Robinson, formerly known as Cash, and I also work in Upward Bound in TRIO department.
I'm Nick. I'm the post-secondary enrollment specialist with PSU and CIS.
Susan Matheson Young, and I'll be teaching in nursing.
And Susan was there yesterday too. So, anyway, so welcome to all of our new employees. And that was all I had, so I'll turn it over. Oh.
So very quickly, we're going to talk about new programs. And we've talked about new programs this year, and it's important for a college, if we want new enrollment, we're going to need to build new programs long term. And so I've been working on developing some kind of process that's transparent so people can see where we're at. And so there is a SharePoint site with all the templates of what we'll research. There's also an opportunity, if you're thinking about a new program, you can email your supervisor, your dean. There's a survey that went out to industry, so we're getting feedback from industry. And all of those ideas are logged on a spreadsheet. And then they're given to a dean to do some very high-level research. Does other schools have it close to us? Is there any employment opportunity? And then collectively, as a dean group, we're going to meet about those and say, should we dig further? Or, you know, there's other schools too close, or the data is telling us not to move forward. All of that will be logged. On a monthly basis, it will be shared at different committees. But anytime people can go into the SharePoint site and see what programs that ideas have come forward and where we are at the process. And I'll give you an example. Hera and I went to Iowa and Tiffany, and they had an agriculture conference, and we saw the diesel program, did a tour. Me, being new, did not know that we used to have, a John Deere program. So Tara and I set up and scheduled a meeting with the faculty. We talked about how it was in the past, if they thought it would be good to try again. And after the discussion, we knew that we didn't want to move forward. The faculty really thought it would hurt their graduates, and because our graduates go into so many different areas. So that's all logged on the spreadsheet of why we're not moving forward with it. So anyone can go see that. They can go see the templates. And if there's more places that you want updates, we can, this is a very new process, so it's changing day by day. Two areas I want to talk about right before the end of the year, and Kari did a lot of work and it's been talked about at town halls. We did receive a grant for solar, and so we will have solar launched at the actual solar pieces at each of our campuses. But what we're really excited about is in the future we will have a solar program. It may look like a solar installer, it may look like a solar technician. We're not sure. We have to start the research. We were just awarded the grant last Friday. So that research will begin now, but that will be one of our newest programs that will come on campus. Because we have the solar going into each of our campuses, we have options of where we want to put that program. But we have a lot of research to do, and we just have a lot of talking about solar to see what will be the best fit for our campus. Another area that we're very excited about, but we also need some help with, is the education transfer pathways. So for the first time in Minnesota State, students will be able to go to a 2-year college to become a teacher. And that's very exciting. If you want to be a teacher, typically right now you go to a university, but Minnesota State has laid out transfer pathways. We would like to be innovative, and we still need to get feedback to put into place the education pathways for early childhood, elementary education, special education, and communication arts and literature. That would be the best dream. You know, it's going to take a while. We're working with Katie Schmea. She is currently working with St. Cloud State and the Board of Teaching, because there are some additional requirements. We've asked her to help us work through these pathways because she has those connections in the two places. And there's some work that we're going to have to do with these pathways. In certain areas, we'll need to be adding some additional learning goals or objectives to our current objectives that we have. So I've asked Katie, and Martha's worked with Katie, to reach out to those different departments to see if there's any interest in forging through and being a part of this exciting pathway. One of the reasons why I'm so excited about this pathway is every day I see how passionate each of you are about teaching. And I know at a 2-year college, you have such a great experience that you could bring our future teachers. And so I am really excited about this opportunity of the pathway. It would be something new for us, and I think it is an area that we can grow. It is one of the #1 transfers that we do to St. Cloud State, is we transfer people who want to go into a teaching profession, so why not have them here for 2 years first? So we're really excited about that, but there's many other programs on that Excel spreadsheet. Ideas that have come up are carpentry, HVAC, plumbing, culinary. There's other transfer pathways that are being worked on also. So when you get a chance, please go look at the SharePoint site. And that is under Academic Affairs and New Programs. There is also a survey that went out, which on the PowerPoint, there was a link to it. So if you don't want to email your supervisor, or a dean or me, you can go in and log into the survey and put your information in there, your ideas there too. So either way, just share with someone if you have an idea, and we'll start to research those. So thank you, everyone, for your ideas and working together on new programming. Do you have a question? Yeah. Okay, we're ready for our 15-minute break.
at the point of the agenda where we're a little behind, but we will catch up. So this session was to start at 9:30, so we're just a little behind, continuing to build the CLC culture, mission, vision, and values. So what I'd like to do is just talk to you about why the heck we're doing this. Because the truth is, when you start talking, maybe you're all different. It's possible. Usually when you start to talk about mission, vision, and values, some people like me get very excited. Others go, oh my God, this is going to hurt, right? So this is going to be painful. I promise you it will not be painful, but it's such important work, and that's why I get so excited about it. You know that we've had a strategic plan that took us through 2015, so it was in place when I got here, and it has ended in 17. So we have this great opportunity to develop a new strategic plan. And that work is going to happen this semester. But before we develop an actual strategic plan that helps to chart our path going forward, we want to take the opportunity to really look at our mission, our vision, and our values. And that's because they're really important tenets. And I believe that if they're done well, they can be very important to an institution. There are a lot of mission, vision, values that you spend a lot of time writing, and you've on that committee, and you've wordsmithed it to death, and you're just so happy it's over, and it goes onto the website and on a shelf, never to be seen again. Yes? See, you've done that. We're not doing that. So we've had a fabulous committee whose names that I totally did not bring. Do you have them? Oh, thanks. Thank you. It's great to have people who are organized. Thank you, Kari. So if the following people, if you're here, could stand up, I would appreciate it. So Jill Albee, I don't think Jill is here. Kari Christensen. Stand up, please. Melody Weber. Thank you. Melody. Phil Olson. Wendy Adamson. Jana Sjogren. Jordan Johnson, who's the president of Student Senate in the Staples campus. Liz Tinsley. Nick Heiser. You guys are alone in the room so far. Sam Espana. Nate Peterson. I know Nate's in here. There we go. Thank you. Greg Bergman. Joy Bodine. Martha Keene. Osiris Washington, who is the president of Student Senate here on the Brainerd campus. Susie Karsnia. And Ken Doles. Ken Doles, who was here. Stand up, Ken. There you go. All right, let's give him a round of applause. Thank you very much. So the reason that you should be giving them a round of applause is they're really doing some seriously heavy lifting. It is hard to develop mission, vision, and values. It's really hard. Even if it's a bunch of 12, 15 people alone in a room wordsmithing it to death. That's hard. But that's not what they were charged to do. They were charged with taking all the data that we've collected at this institution and having listening sessions, which we've done, and putting surveys out and collecting tons of information that is your voice, and coming up with drafts that represent that feedback. That's really hard. So I'm really grateful to that team. And I want to talk a little bit about why it's so important. You know, when we started this, I started out by saying, oh, this is not mine. I'm about to give it away. Started out by saying, usually you start with a mission, right? And the mission is a statement that describes who we are and what we do today. It is who we are and what we do. And you know that our mission is we build futures. One thing we could have done is pitch that out of the window and started afresh. However, I've gotten the feeling over the past year and a half that we rally around that mission. So I asked the committee to leave that statement alone and instead make sure that the rest of the mission, which are the supporting bullets below it that define it, really do reflect who we are and what we do today. So they have, with your input, starting back at the last in service, been crafting and are at final draft for the mission that you went out via email. So they've left We Build Futures, but have revised those bullets. That should tell us who we are and what we do. So if anybody ever wants to find out what's that CLC about, they might ask one of us, and we might say our mission is We Build Futures. But when they go on our website, they will see We Build Futures and those supporting declarative statements that define all that is important to us. The mission is critical, but it's what we do today and what we will likely always do. It is a fair constant. So you're going to hear about those statements that you've weighed into. They were then asked to develop values. Now, this I alluded to when I spoke to you earlier. And again, there was nothing wrong with our values. These are some of the hardest statements to develop because they're all good things. So people throw things out like, well, shouldn't we have excellence? Yes. Shouldn't we have learning? Oh, yes, we should. Shouldn't we have cutting edge technology? Yes, we should do that. You end up with these 30 names of 30 great things that, of course, we would want all of them. It's really difficult to whittle them down to just a few that truly do embody the essence of the institution. That's the hard part about the value statements. But if you leave it as a list of 20 or 30, it becomes that thing that goes on the website or on the shelf because nobody remembers all those things. We just say we value all things good. That's not useful, might be true, but it's not useful. So the task was to narrow it down to just 3 to 5 things that really are big constructs that embody who we are, so that eventually when you will all know what our values are. You know our mission, we build futures. You don't have to know all the bullets, but you need to know what the values are. We need to live them because ultimately those values will describe how we interact, who we are, how our policies work. They should be functional, and if there are 30 of them, it's not going to happen. So the committee looked at all the data about the culture that you said you wanted to create last fall, Ken's data from the CLC experience, and came up with just those 4 values that I shared with you earlier, and you will see in just a moment. There have been many opportunities to weigh in, and once again, I just don't want to miss an opportunity to say thank you for all of your feedback, because when we ask for it, we get it, which is a really good thing. So today, you are going to see what those final versions of our mission and values are if you didn't read your email, because I'm sure you all did that, right? I'm sure you've all studied email before your break. But what we're going to do today is spend some time on vision. Vision, I think, is the hardest statement. It is not a statement of who we are and what we do today. It's a statement of where we want to go. The best vision statements we probably never achieve. They're things that we all agree that we can move toward. Our current vision statement is, and there's not a thing wrong with it, is to be the leading community and technical college for lifelong learning in the state of Minnesota. Nothing wrong with that. Does it mean anything to you? I'm really asking. It's not rhetorical. Does it really mean anything to anybody? We want to be the leading community and technical college for lifelong learning in the state of Minnesota. So for most people, they go, oh, there's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't bring to mind, oh yes, let's move in that direction. We asked the committee to come up with a vision statement that we can all get behind, that is somewhat emotional, that means something to us, that is in line with our students and that focus, and that it's something that we can reach for the next 3 years or 5 years or 20 years. But it has to be something that we have not yet achieved. And that's what makes it hard, because in our lives, we don't have much opportunity to think like that. There are some people that have personal vision statements. Trust me, I am not one of those people. I've always admired that ability to say, this is what I see in the future. I can tell you what I see for dinner. I can tell you what I see next week. But I cannot look 3 to 5 years ahead and say, this is what I see. But people who can do that are always reaching for that goal. And it's what we ask our students to do all the time. What is your goal? What is your vision? It can be 2 years down the road or 4 years down the road or 20 years down the road. But if we're not reaching for something, we're just spinning where we are. And we can't let that happen. So the committee has worked really hard on a vision statement with lots and lots of input. And today, you'll divide up into groups. And that's what the little number on your name tag is. You didn't win something. Sorry. Somebody said, did I win something? No, you didn't. Unless you got a great group. You won a great group. That's right. So that you can give some feedback, see if we're on the right track. But why are these things so important? Just to have them know. So the goal that I started with is that we're developing a strategic plan, right? None of this sounds very strategic. These sound like statements. Once we have a mission statement that tells us what we do and who we are today, we build futures. And we have a vision statement that says, here's where we want to be one day, and we can decide whether it's 3 or 5 or 8 or whatever years. It becomes very easy to then say, oh, if we all agree that that's where we want to go, Our strategic directions are the dotted lines to get us there. So, for example, if we left our vision statement what it is, and it's all about lifelong learning, there's nothing wrong with that in the world, then we would have to say as a college and a committee, okay, so we build futures and we want to be the leading community and technical college in the state of Minnesota for lifelong learning. How are we going to do that? It's not just a statement. It's where we want to go. So, if we can get a powerful, exciting vision statement that's a bit emotional, and we have to get a little of emotion in there because our mission is emotional. We don't do things very flat around here, do we? We need a little power in there. Then we will use that as a beacon. And for the remaining part of the semester, the committee will then say, all right, this is our mission. That's our new vision. How are we going to get there? And that will be those strategic directions. Does that make sense? Really? Oh, I've lost them. So you guys have to find them again because they're gone. I can tell that they're all, you know when your students' eyes glaze over? And you know it's over. I mean, it's like probably 40 minutes in. You're there. I can tell you're there. It's all the carbs, probably. Anyway, so that's what we're going to do today. So keep in mind two things. The mission and the values, we never get to a point where everyone goes, that's it. That's the other hard part about these statements. You could wordsmith these babies forever. Just over and over and over again. Never get to that point. The question really is, does that feel about right? Remember that we're not stuck with these till the end of time. Next year, we can say, we tweak that mission. It's ours, so we can do that. But the statements that we now are presenting are the result of lots and lots of input, which you'll hear about. And we'll spend a little bit of time sharing those, but most of the time we'll be getting your input on those vision statements that you saw via email. And that allows the committee to set the strategic directions. And the last thing I'll say about strategic directions is there'll be much input, but strategic directions can either be very specific, like we will develop 12 new programs in the next 3 years. Could be that. Please, let's not make it that. Or it can be really directional, like we will commit resources to developing new programs, or anything in between. Our intention, though, is that these are broad directions so that we're all going in the same direction, but if you have this great idea, this innovative concept, that these are broad enough that we can fit that in. We need to be flexible. We need to be able to adapt as things change, and trust me, things will change, and we need to make sure that we're adaptable. So does that make sense about what it is that we're trying to achieve? Keep in mind that I promise you these will be used. Once we finalize the mission, the values, and the vision, we then have to decide how we make sure that they are things that we live and that we don't just go, thank goodness it's over. And I commit to you that we will live them. We do live our mission. We will find a way to put those values out there, and I expect that we'll be developing some recognition around individuals who really help us achieve and embody those values. And when it comes to our vision, there may be ways that we can promote that, both internally and externally. So we're going to spend some real time on it so that we live these things. So it's not a waste of time. Got it? They're tired. All right, so who's next? Kari is next.
I always get the fortunate opportunity to follow Hera and her enthusiasm, so we do appreciate it very much. Just a hard act to follow. I just want to talk just very briefly, and Hera's covered it, but a little bit about our process. It's going to be a bit redundant, but I want you to know the good work of the committee and know what data they've looked at and what the process that they've used to come up with the proposals that we'll go through next. First, I just want to talk about what our charge was as a committee. It was to lead the strategic planning process with guiding principles of 1, focusing on student success. Here's our theme for the day, right? And 2, ensuring voice and input with from the college community. So that was our charge. So we've had 18 committee members that have met from July through December multiple times. And I'm just going to list out some of the data that we've looked at. All of this is available on SharePoint. We have a SharePoint site, and all of it is there, so you can go out and take a look at it if you'd like to. John Hammerlink, who was the director of our RETA program, had done an environmental scan for us, and so we reviewed that at one of our very first meetings. We've talked a lot about culture today. Last year we had some focus groups on culture, and so we brought in those results from 2016 and reviewed that as a committee. Ken Doles had led a CLC experience focus groups. He had done those in spring of 2017. So we looked at that data because, again, culture is very important to us. That's what we're trying to build. That's, gives us direction for the work that we do every day. Janice Shogren had led some priority discussions in the spring. Remember, we talked about resources and budget, and we really felt like we needed to have some conversations as a college community about priorities before we focus on resource allocation. And I'm just going to share this one tidbit. You've probably heard me say this before, but I went to a conference years and years ago, and it was on linking budget and strategic plan. And I'll never forget it. What they basically said is, if you don't have a plan and you're not following your plan, your budget is your plan. Because how you spend your resources really are determining those priorities, right? And so it's really critical that we get ahead of this and we have that vision and we have that focus, because that will drive how we allocate our resources for us as an institution. So we incorporated the priority conversations from last spring. And then in the fall semester, we had a draft mission and values. We got feedback at in-service and did some revisions and got those revised statements out to everyone. And then we did a vision exercise as part of fall semester in-service. So all of that feedback was received, reviewed by the committee. We've incorporated feedback all along the way. There have been emails, there have been, electronic surveys. We've pulled all of that in. We've given updates at Fiscal Facilities Committee and whatnot. And then as we were nearing the end of fall semester, the committee really had some conversations about, the importance of vision. And so you'll remember that Ken Doles and Janice Shogren had some sessions again in the fall. We really felt like we needed more face-to-face conversations about vision and where we're headed. So they held some vision sessions at both campuses in the fall, or late fall semester. And then we got together and had a small group, and then our full group met to review the draft vision statements. And then right before Christmas break, we sent out an email with the draft. And again, the committee really felt like our college community needs time. You need time to look at the mission, the values, and the draft vision statement, and have time to get your head around it and say, is this who we are as an institution? Are these our values? And have some time before our exercise today to think about it and get some feedback. And we have gotten some feedback already, which we'll incorporate. So again, today, we just kind of wanted to reiterate that, we've really tried to look at a lot of data, provide opportunities for input, and the focus really is going to be on the vision statement. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Joy.
So as you can see, we have what the team thinks is the final mission statement. And this is with everybody's feedback. It's been tweaked multiple times, sent out via survey, and changed based on all the feedback that we've gotten. And so we think that's in final form. But today, as you're working in your groups, if you do have a tweak, please feel free to put it down, because it will always be reviewed. And then thank you. And then these are the values, and there was a lot of discussion on these. Should respect be included? But so with your feedback, for example, respect was actually moved up as the part of the mission. And so we're taking everybody's feedback and incorporating that. So today what we're going to do, so you have the special name tags with the numbers on them. You're going to break into groups, 10 different groups, and you're going to look at our vision statement. The committee has worked really hard to come up with 2 potential vision statements, And we want you to look at those, think about those, add feedback to those, or also throw them out and draft a new one with your team. But so I'm going to ask you to move into groups 1 through 10, and you can probably start group 1 over here, and then just 10 will end up over here somewhere. And do you all have worksheets? We can distribute those. And so between 10:15 and 10:30, you'll work with your group and write feedback down. And from 10:30 to 10:45, we're going to have a report out. Thank you.
We're group 1, and I learned something new. I learned what parallel structure is from Brandy, my English teacher. So this is statement 2. One of the things that we thought would make it sound great through parallel structure was CLC, just cross out is the college that. CLC embraces innovation, inspires learning, and transforms lives. Can you see how it's parallel? Because it has 2 words in each phrase. That was one of the things, because my question was, what does innovates mean? Because it can mean so many things. And so if you say embraces innovation, then it actually, that had more meaning to me. And Kevin, our new employee, came up with that word embrace, and I loved it. And you should know that he's got a brain in him.
Do you have any sheets? Group 2? Sorry.
Okay, we're group 2, and we had similar conversations about parallel language. And we also had the word embrace, so apparently that's a popular term. One of the things that we talked about was getting rid of the acronym in our statement, even though we all know what CLC is, that it's important to maybe say the college, Central Lakes College. And we also took out, we were looking at number 1, but we took out the be known to, so it goes right into, because that also implies will be known, means that we're not innovating or inspiring learning right now. So we took that out of ours as well. We also had some discussion about not symmetrically talking about our values that are there, like innovation is one of our values, and that verb is used in the statement, but the other ones aren't. Necessarily, like inspire isn't in there, or learning. So that was one thing that just a note. And a second idea was proposed too, with maybe if we just list learning and lives, that we're limiting what we inspire and what we transform. So is there a way that maybe we could, maybe even with periods, that Central Lakes College will inspire, transform, period, instead of saying what exactly we're going to transform. And the last thing that maybe we decided, I think we needed a little bit more time, but this might go underneath the mission part of it, and the bullets underneath the mission would be to, I'll let Jeff talk about the passion part and why that's important.
This is my last pitch for this word. I think the word love needs to be in here somewhere. I think love is what makes this college go. I feel love in this room, and I think that is what motivates our teaching. Patrick Spradlin doesn't just like theater, he loves it, and that's why he does that. I don't run a little reading series here for poetry because I'm vaguely fond of poetry. I love it, and I think the word should be in here, and I think it drives everything.
Do you have any sheets? Group 3?
Okay, we ditto the mission statement word for word exactly with everything, but the science teacher came up with embraces, which she credits to Hera, wherever Hera is, so she stole it from Hera this morning. And then the other suggestion, we just were reflecting on our mission and the We Build Futures piece, and underneath the bulleted points too, we thought maybe there could be something like establish meaningful connections with possible future careers. By that, like, we mean internships, like a database of internships. Somebody could have that somewhere, so we could connect them to places. We know that they do, like Sandra mentioned, the Natural Resources has a lot of internships that they've provided for students and that have turned into actual jobs, which is great. And other departments would benefit from something like that as well. So that was all.
All right, well, we're number 4, and we want to go down. Noted that we think we're going to win this competition. If you remember the poster that we were very competitive out there. No. No, what we talked about is making sure that we could measure it and actually making sure that the students understood what was meant about the vision, not us just as faculty writing this great vision statement. And so we had Cash, who was just a prior student, that had some extra ideas that I think kind of helped. We also thought that Central Lakes College should be definitely spelled out and not just CLC. We got rid of is the college that. So ours reads, Central Lakes College innovates, inspires learning, promotes a culture that welcomes diversity, and transforms lives. So we added the promotes a culture that welcomes diversity because from a student perspective, that welcoming piece is, we thought, went along with the respectful and supportive environment in our mission and kind of tied in the diversity a little bit more.
Group 5. Thank you. Oh. Thank you.
Group 5. We had a vote between 1 and 2 on the proposed vision statement. It was a very close vote. Number 2 barely won. The problem is we were dissecting what a vision statement needs to be, and it needs to be what you want to achieve. And the CLC will be known as or known to. It sounds like past tense, like we've already done that. The college is the network, or the college is, CLC is the college. I can't even read. Sounds like we've already done that. So really, we struggled with both of them. What do we want to be known as, or what do we want to achieve? I like the number 3 option that was presented by Group 1. That was awesome. So, and actually what Brandy said with that paralyzed wording. Oh, parallel. They mean the same thing, don't they? Right on. I actually had, how does CLC innovate? How do we want to do that? There's got to be more to that. So the embrace innovation, I liked. I don't know about the rest of my group, but we're kind of a weird group. And the other thing is, but we really need to look at that innovate again because it is repeated in the value statement. So I think we need more time, but I don't know if we want to duplicate what we're saying in the different statements, and maybe we do. But now you can see why on the committee it takes so long to get this kind of stuff done. So.
Can I grab your sheets?
Oh.
Okay, Group 6.
Thank you. Group 6. We debated between number 1 and number 2, but we chose number 2. I think we all kind of liked what group number 1 did with the CLC embraces innovation, inspires learning, and transforms lives. Agree with probably spelling out Central Lakes College. I was a little afraid to be critical at all because I talked to Ken Doles beforehand, and he said, it's great the way it is. So, sorry. Let's see.
Group 7. Over here.
We formed a couple subcommittees and a task force, and we basically came up with what Group 1 had. CLC innovates, inspires, and transforms lives, period.
Group 8.
Group 8 started with a vote on 1 or 2, and we kind of leaned more towards number 2 because number 1 is will be known, and we thought, well, when is that going to happen? So we were leaning towards number 2 because it's present and hopefully future as well. But we kind of had help from Sharon, right? To change it up a little bit, and then some other ideas came in about, like some people said, taking the CLC and spreading it out. So we came up with Central Lakes College is the leader in innovation, inspiring learning, and transforming lives. Just felt a little bit more, I guess, inspirational, being the leader, I think is where we were leaning towards. And then I also had a quick at the end I wanted to add too. I loved Jane's addition in the past year or so of the growth mindset. And I feel like our college is really moving towards that growth mindset quite a bit, and it's a good thing. So I was trying to find where in the mission, the values, or in the statement we could add that growth mindset. So I also rewrote the vision statement a little bit to add that at the end. I don't know if it has to, if it should be in there, but CLC is the college that innovates, inspires learning, and transforms lives to a growth mindset.
Group 8? Oh, Group 9?
So at number 9, all the good stuff has been said already. We also chose the number 2 option because it is an active voice, not passive. And we also took out the words, is the college that? So Central Lakes College or CLC. We had a little discussion about that, but no decision. Innovates, inspires learning, and transforms lives. And there was also discussion about whether or not to just remove the word learning because we hope to inspire more than learning.
Can I get yours? Group 10?
We intentionally chose number 10, knowing that all the good ideas are going to be already taken, so we don't have to take much responsibility here. So we deferred to number 1 because they thought they had the greatest idea. There was some discussion about a period or not, so we like that. We had an English person here. So yeah, number 1, your suggestion is best.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your feedback. The committee will review all the feedback, and we will get our final draft out to everyone to provide further input. So thanks, everyone. We'll be taking a 15-minute break and see you back here at 11.
directly into that.
Want me to whistle?
Go for it. Sure. Our crowd is fitting. We're going to get started. Good morning. I'm Mary Sam. I'm the Dean of Students, Equity and Inclusion. Can you hear me in the back? I know you have to kind of hold this way. A couple of things before we start the formal presentation. Just a quick reminder from the iCare team. If you run into a student this spring that you're concerned about in terms of mental health issues, they're struggling emotionally, make sure that you go to SharePoint under counseling and fill out an iCare report form. We had some incidences this last year where folks maybe had kind of forgotten that process, but make sure that you fill out that form. That way Susie can contact that student and trying to find the support that they need immediately. If it's a student that's an imminent crisis, you're afraid for yourself, you're afraid that the student is in immediate danger, call security. It's always okay to also call 911 if there's an immediate threat. We also have our crisis interventionists as part of our iCare team. You can always call the information desk. All of you have that little card that has those phone numbers on that. And at any given time, folks at the Staples campus or the Brainerd campus will be there that are trained to respond when a student is also in crisis. So just a quick reminder on that note. This afternoon, I'm going to be sending out a list of the the spring inclusion and cultural events. We've got a lot going on this spring, from sex trafficking presentations to learning about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, to cupcakes and condoms, teaching young people about safe sex, and so we're going to be handing out cupcakes and condoms at the same time at both campuses. Scott Foster is going to be training our Student Senate again on privilege, power, and difference. He's also going to open that up campus-wide to students and employees to have 4 different conversations this spring to learn more about the constructs of implicit bias, privilege, and power. And you're going to hear a little bit about that this morning. Living in a post-racial society, why does race matter? Resilience, facing racism. And again, Tracy with Cultural Thursdays, a number of big speakers. And we're also going to be doing a men's session this spring, the cultural construction of genital. I knew I'd do it. Gender. And if I wouldn't have laughed, I would have been just fine, right? The cultural construction of gender identity and manhood. How do you recover from that one? Okay. I did it. I do it every time. Okay. Hera, stop. So we're here today to not talk about genitalia. We're here to talk about equity and inclusion. And the system office has really prescribed some pretty steep goals for us to meet in the next year. Not only under our last chancellor, but also the interim chancellor. And I think that's also going to be the direction that the Board of Trustees is going to push the Minnesota State system in to continue to take a look at our hiring practices, our student achievement data, and how do we be more equitable, how do we be more inclusive. We've talked a lot about retention today. You're going to hear that word a lot. You're going to hear a lot more about equity, equity-mindedness this spring. We need to take a look at how do we close the opportunity gap. Hera talked about that this morning. We've made progress. We have a lot more work to do. And we've got a lot of work to do in the region. Oftentimes we think that our students of color at Central Lakes College are only our athletes. Folks, this is a changing community. We've got more black families in this community. We've got more, we've always been here, American Indian families in this community, Latino and Latina and Asian families as well. This is the Brainerd Staples region, and it's continuing to grow, it's continuing to thrive. We also need to make sure that those communities, our communities, are continuing to be successful. Our diversity plan, our affirmative action plan are calling on us with, again, the mandate not only by the chancellor, but also HERA's work plan to take a look at equity planning, to talk about how, again, do we close this opportunity gap. So a handful of folks went through a training this about 2 months ago. Charles, Alita Peterson, Tracy Jimenez, Wendy Adamson, and then I went through a separate training on equity planning. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is equity mindedness and how do we create an equity plan here at Central Lakes College where we can take a look at some of the data, different measures of data in terms of how do we close the opportunity gap, and also to take a look at practices that sometimes create barriers. You know, when HLC and No Levitz came through, they gave us some really good feedback, and we made some changes, and we're seeing students be more successful as a result of addressing those changes or addressing those recommendations, right? So Charles is going to talk a little bit about the equity planning process, what they learned in that process, and then also to extend an invitation to any of you as faculty and staff that want to be a part of the CLC team, the planning team, to take a look at equity and what does that look like on our campus. Following Charles, we've invited Scott to come up and begin the conversation with us to start taking a look at what does privilege mean, what does power mean, what does difference mean, what does implicit bias mean, and how do those factors interfere with sometimes how we work together, how we work with our students, and how we interface with our community. So if we're really wanting to focus on retention and close that opportunity gap, taking a look at privilege, power, and difference is a key factor in that. So I'd like to invite Charles up and then followed by Scott, and we'll leave some time at the very end for some dialogue. Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary. And I'm going to take this opportunity with the license that's been provided by Mary to utter the words cupcakes, condoms, and genitalia. Just because this may not happen very often on campus. So I put myself on a timer for those of you that know me so I can keep my comments within the hour amount of time. So just kidding. I'll try to be done in about 15 minutes or so. My role here is just to talk with you a little bit about equity mindedness here at CLC. And just so you know, this is kind of a newer concept for many of you. I know it has been for me. And so just view this 10 minutes or so conversation and PowerPoint as more of the primer of the overall painting project we have going on here at CLC. So this is just some of the early flavors of what we'll be up to and what we'll be encouraging or asking all of you to be a part of as well. So if there's some things that might go over your head a bit, that's okay. So and there will be some time at the end to answer any specific questions that you might have. So I'm going to, just for the sake of time, cut through some of these interesting facts here. Just wanted to let you know that if there's anything in the PowerPoint that you would like, just let Mary or I know and we can get you this PowerPoint as well. So one thing that we talked about when we were in St. Paul and began learning a little bit about equity mindedness was that a favorable policy environment alone cannot create equitable outcomes. Gotta be careful with my slips today. Anyhow, so basically having a wonderful president, a wonderful dean like Mary, and having those type of things in place are key and crucial, but it doesn't necessarily equate that we're going to have racially equitable outcomes. What we do need is not only the proper host environment, but we also need at the institution structures, new culture, practices, and then also routines. So that's another thing we're going to touch base on just a little bit today about how we might get there. So many of you have seen these type of slides if you're on Facebook, or maybe some of these things have gone around on the on email and whatnot. But equality basically imagines an equal world. But that world isn't necessarily equal. And I don't know if any of you can see this, but there's a number of different things involved that puts this person a little bit higher. Scholarships, educated, that particular student, middle to upper class, active social networks, and social capital. One thing I've been told to include on there is some of us extremely handsome or good looking also adds to that. So within the same picture, a diversity lens focuses only on bringing more students into the unequal pathway. So in contrast, we try to provide or redirect a lot of those resources into the student's life, or in other words, to fix the barriers and intentionally provide support for students. You can see that a number of different pieces, I won't go through all of them, like goal setting and action planning, and then inquiry to understand how practices impede equity. So starting to get a little deep there, I know, and we'll try to unpack that a little bit here in the next few minutes. What is equity? Equity as parity in outcomes, more specifically the proportional representation of historically marginalized groups in outcomes. So essentially you see the operative piece here is what we really want is if there's 32% Latino students entering school, we also would like to have 32% of those Latino students also graduating. Real basic, but it's one thing that we'd like you all to be thinking about as you work with your students. So there's a few different approaches, and I'll try not to go too deep into these. There's a positivist approach. We're not going to talk too much about that, unfortunately. And there's a critical approach. So with this particular approach, it talks about basically data and the need to impart meaning and initiate change, which is good. We all like that. We hear a lot about, is this a data-driven college? Is this a data-driven decision and whatnot? And that's great. But the critical approach is it requires data also to have racial contextualization. I'm going to say that again just because I can. Racial contextualization. Anyhow, and that's basically sense-making to impart meaning and initiate change. So it's not just using the data, but it's also looking at the data through the eyes or through the lens of equity, but also including racial contextualization as well. Boiling that down a little bit further, which might be helpful, is white students are more likely to enroll and succeed in my department. That's this approach. Critical approach, what is it about the courses in my department in terms of structure, faculty expectations, student engagement, etc., that better support white student enrollment and success? Contextualization. So, one thing that might be coming to mind, and one thing that we'll talk about further, not necessarily today, but as we begin to walk through the paces as an institution, are what are some of these conversations as it relates to data that we might want to name or that we might want to discuss. Go ahead and read through these on your own, but just know that there's a number of conversations that we're going to want to have as an institution.
And some of that isn't always easy.
Right. Absolutely. One thing, though, is discomfort with talking about race. I think that's one thing, at least at an institution of higher education, we think that it's okay and we understand that it's okay to talk about race, but really getting down to the nuts and bolts and really naming certain pieces of it and how that might even impact your particular classroom, that can really be an uncomfortable space. And that's one of the things when we talk about equity-mindedness is that we're really digging for is not necessarily wanting to critique anything within the classroom, but more importantly, sense-making in terms of why are students maybe not being as successful in the classroom, that type of thing. best practices versus best practitioners. Kind of splitting hairs a bit, I suppose, here in terms of the best practices, data, gaps in educational outcomes, and then solutions. Very basic. That's one thing that we've talked about a lot in education over the last few years. Very important. Now, as it relates to equity-mindedness, you have data, you have gaps, and then inquiry into the causes. Why is that? Why is that American Indian student or that Latino student not being as successful in one's class? And then informed interventions, and then evaluation of interventions as well. So again, equity-mindedness. So one of the things we wanted to make sure that you come away from this quick presentation this morning, which I'm 8 minutes into, is noticing racial inequities is equity-mindedness, acknowledging that practices may not be working, understanding inequity as a dysfunction of structures, policy, and practices, questioning assumptions, recognizing stereotypes and implicit biases, and then finally, taking action to eliminate inequity. There's a lot of different words here. I really want to draw you to here in terms of how to customize it. These are really the things that we're going to be working towards as an institution. We're going to be looking at racial ethnic groups, inclusion of groups, smaller groups, not just the large ones, but especially smaller groups. For example, if you look at the Brainerd School District, my wife Catherine and I, as we're advocating for our children over there, once in a while we'll hear, well, the American Indian population is so small, we just kind of bunch them all together in multicultural and whatnot, or as under the heading diversity, which is great, but really, how is this education really meeting the needs of my American Indian daughter, or Latino child, or black? Instead of just bunching them all into one group, let's look at them a little more specifically instead of just bunching them all in to make them large enough to pay attention to as it relates to data. Then finally, start date and characteristics of the cohort, end date and criteria of completion. Next steps. The one thing that we're going to want to do as an institution is to provide all of you tools. So this isn't just something that we're going to have a presentation today and then kind of send the boat off adrift. Part of my role here is to begin accessing and bringing some of those tools to campus, along with many of you that are interested to be a part of that process, and then provide structures for data analysis and prompts for sense making. Again, that's that critical thought, that piece like, well, why is that American Indian student not doing well in my class? Instead of just simply, boy, that American Indian student didn't do well, did he or she? Make data accessible, visual measures, etc. That's going to be key, because you all don't necessarily want more things added to your course syllabi and whatnot, or to have to track more data. So we want to make things as accessible and measurable as possible for all of you. And then we want to remind peers that small numbers equal our students as well. Back to my children. Yeah, there might not be a lot of American Indians at school, but really that's important as well. And that's more or less what we're after here as it relates to being equity-minded. Some things to keep in mind: move from equity gaps to action, identify inquiry activities, conduct inquiry activities, and then capture inquiry findings. So that's kind of maybe more of a linear way to look at what we're after here as well. And then equity assets, activity, and diagram. So basically, as I'm beginning to wrap this up here, there's a large form, if you will, where if you choose to be a part of this in your classroom or as a part of the institutional working groups, where we'll be able to work on certain focuses or focal points. And this is kind of highlights some of that. But basically, we'll be looking at who, what, when, how, and why questions. And that tool is right here. So again, we don't want to go too deep into this. This looks like a lot. But the one thing in planning for this quick presentation Mary and I talked about is we both referenced when we were able to go through this particular project, myself and some of the other CLC team members that went down to St. Paul, being able to walk through this, what is our focal effort, and then how do we get to that. But also the opportunity that we're going to have here at CLC to be able to create this type of tool for our specific courses or departments and whatnot. So with that in mind, hopefully you have a quick or a little better view of what being equity-minded is. But if you have any questions, please feel free right now to ask those. Or again, you can definitely talk to Mary I, or we could send you that PowerPoint as well. Any questions? All right, 13 minutes and 10 seconds.
Thanks, Charles. So also our funding is dependent upon, right? Making sure that we're closing the opportunity gap. And more, again, the Board of Trustees is holding us accountable to, are we closing the gaps between men and women, veterans, underrepresented students, students of color, and American Indians. And so this is one of those things that, yes, it's a have to, but it's also one of those things that's the right thing to do. And it's also tied into funding. So this is really a big deal where, again, we're just starting the conversation. If you have any interest in being a part of the equity planning team, it's pretty green at this point. The system office, and Charles is going to be on the team down at the system office, working with other faculty and chief equity officers from throughout the system to create an equity plan that's also going to be presented at the CAO Dean's Conference this spring. So again, we're on the front end of this, but again, important work. So with that, I'd like to introduce Scott. Thank you for taking time with us this morning.
All right, thank you, Mary, for giving me the opportunity to do this. I was talking to Bob Brecken before the presentation here, and we were talking about how many people were sick over break, and I had a flu shot, and I asked Bob if he had a flu shot, and he said, as long as everybody else gets one, I don't need one. So I thought, okay, Bob, all right. There's I've got some of these slides packed with words, and I know that's a no-no. But I tried to whittle them down as best as I could. Whoops. Oh, that's what I did. But basically, there is a tremendous amount of trouble that surrounds privilege and power and difference. And, scientific knowledge really leaves absolutely no doubt that there's a lot of unnecessary suffering that takes place. And so it's frustrating as a social scientist to know that the solutions are there, the data's there, and we're still struggling with this. I think back to Rodney King and his comment, can't we just all get along? It seems so simple, but obviously it's not simple. As was mentioned by Charles and Mary, it's difficult to talk about this. And I was at the Student Senate meeting maybe a month ago, and someone was frustrated because, this person said they don't know how to refer to, American Indians or Native Americans. And almost like I give up. I'm just not gonna use the words anymore. And I said, well, he said, so what do you call them? I said, well, you could ask them. What do you want me to call you? Do you prefer American Indian, Native American? It's not that difficult. But people are so afraid to make mistakes, and we just have to kind of get over that. So if your intentions are good, hopefully you don't have anything to worry about. So I've got a little quiz here. It's just a true-false quiz, just to kind of set the foundation for the discussion here. And that's what I'll do for the most part. I will kind of lay a foundation for where I'm coming from a sociological perspective. And then I'll talk about equity-mindedness and implicit bias. And then the rest of that will be left for these 4 different sessions that I'll do the rest of the semester. So true or false, scientists are able to determine a person's race by examining their DNA. Is that true or false? It's false, right? There's no race gene. You know, this idea of race is not fixed. You know, the Irish, I was just watching something on the Irish last week, and, you know, it reminded me about how the Irish were considered their own separate race when they migrated to the United States in the early 1900s. You know, they were the Irish race. We don't think of the Irish as a race anymore. What it means to be white, what it means to be black, Native, I mean, it's on a spectrum, right? So there's no fixed categories of race. And I think that's important to know, because then we realize that this whole concept of race isn't real, we could say. For example, a person may be categorized as black in the United States but not in Brazil. And it reminded me of a article I read about a woman who came from Brazil to the United States, and she said, I didn't know I was black till I came to the United States. True or false? Skin color is only skin deep. True. You know, the genes for skin color have nothing to do with eye shape, hair form, blood type, musical talent, athletic ability, or level of intelligence. You know, the genes that produce the skin color, that's all they do. Nothing to do with anything deeper than that. And this was science, you know, 100 years ago. People would take this from 1 to 36, and what you do is pull your sleeve up and you'd put it under your arm and try and match up the tone with the tone under your arm. And then that would determine, in part, your race. You know, I'm a number 6. I'm a number 7. You know, and intelligence was related to that as well. So if you were number 1, you were at the top of the heap. You know, and if you were 36, well, that's just too bad. True or false? Slavery existed before the concept of race. True. You know, as a result of conquest or as a result of owing someone money, you know, an indentured servant, you would pay them back through labor, and you were a slave. It didn't have anything to do with race. Okay, that's an invention in the last couple hundred years. True or false? The concept of race was devised to justify social inequality. That's true. The socially constructed belief in racial superiority justified practices like slavery, justified the extermination of the American Indians, you know, the Chinese Exclusion Act, the taking of lands from Mexico. In order to justify these atrocities, this idea of race was devised. Okay, they're inferior, therefore we don't have to worry about them as human beings and treating them so poorly. They're less than human. I've only got 100 questions, so I better move through these a little quicker. Okay, so true or false? Racism is real. True. Racism is a potent social construct that affords the privileged unequal access to various opportunities and resources. So the question that I always pose in class the first couple days, and it gets students thinking, is, you know, is this: the institutions in this society, okay, you think of educational system, you think of the government, you think of the economic system. We've created these systems. We've created these institutions. So do they operate in such a way that benefits people like me, by race, by class, by gender, more so than others? In other words, was I dealt a pretty good hand to play the moment I was born? And that's not a real popular thing to say in class because we're such an individualistic country. You know, if you succeed, it's because you worked hard. And I'm kind of tossing it out there, you know, that's not the whole story. You know, it's much more complex than that. I think this might be the last one. True or false? Practicing colorblindness will end racism. You know, false. I've had people say in class, I don't see color. You know, I see people for who they are. Well, that's an insult to a lot of people who aren't white, because that's who they are. You know, partially who they are is being African American or American Indian. And so just to say that doesn't matter, that's not what most likely they would like to hear. So this is a sociologist, And I really like this quote. The trouble around racial diversity isn't just that people differ from one another. Obviously, we look different. Okay? But the trouble is produced by a world organized in ways that encourage people to use that difference to include or exclude, reward or punish, credit or discredit, elevate or oppress, value or devalue, leave alone or harass. So we've made something out of these differences, and then we treat people differently based on these differences. So just to reiterate and just wrap that up, race is a social idea. The concept of race, as it is widely understood in the U.S., is not real. Race is merely a social construction. Any comments about that? That's always a hard concept for people to grasp, that race isn't real. This idea that race isn't real. Little trick, so I shut that off so that everybody looks at me instead of the screen, huh? There'll be time afterwards to talk about some of this, and then those series, the 4 series, the rest of the semester. These are the kind of issues I hope to get into, and I won't just be lecturing during those sessions. There'll be dialogue, so I'm looking forward to it. Yep.
I find it difficult to integrate the idea that race isn't real biologically with the fact that institutions, in order to try and build equity, are required to record information and gather information about race.
Yeah. That's a contradiction that's brought up all the time. So we don't treat it as real, yet we still collect information based on race. Yeah. The census now has many more options for people to choose their race. In the past, there were just a handful of choices. But now you can check off that other category, or mixed. But no, I know what you're saying. We've made progress, but there are still some hurdles there. So, talking about race in this concept, that there are no, pure races. Unfortunately, there are consequences. If people think race is real, they act as if it's real. It becomes real in its consequences. So I like to, I think of Martin Luther King Jr. Quite often when I talk about race issues. And, in a couple of weeks, January 15th, we have Martin Luther King Jr. Holiday. The I Have a Dream speech, which everyone, for the most part, is familiar with. He won a Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. So when I was looking through some of this information, I found some things that I thought were maybe coincidence, maybe not. I'm not quite sure. Martin Luther King Jr. was born January 15th, 1929. SEF is Scott Edward Foster. I was born January 15th, 1969. Martin Luther King Jr. has a bachelor's degree in sociology. I have a bachelor's degree in sociology. Martin Luther King went to Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. My next door neighbors growing up, their last name was Moores, so I grew up next to Moore's house. Martin Luther King married a woman named Coretta Scott. My first name is Scott. He was married in June of 1953 at the age of 24. I was married in June of 1993 at the age of 24. And then here's where it gets a little sticky. He was assassinated April 4th, 1968. What's the gestational period for someone from, it's not actually conception, but basically from conception to birth? How many months? Roughly 9? So we're talking April 1968, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January 1969. When was I born? I was born in January of 1969. That's a picture of Martin Luther King Jr. on the right. That's a picture of me on the left. So there are some similarities there. My kids have Snapchat, and so you can do this cool face swap thing where you... So I thought I would do a couple. You can't see them very well, but do you know who I face swapped with on the left? Can you tell? It's an administrator here at the school. The lighting's so poor you can't see. It's myself and Mary Sam combined. That's what our offspring would look like, right there. And then on the right, does anybody recognize that child, that person? If the lighting was better, you could tell. It's myself and Hera. That's right. Yeah. So I always like to have fun with this, this Martin Luther King Jr. thing. I don't believe it. Okay, I don't think I'm reincarnated Martin Luther King Jr. If aliens were to come to this planet, okay, and land in the United States of America and look around to see who was in charge, what would those people look like by race, social class, sex, or gender? What would they look like? Would they look like white men? Now you can't, again, the lighting is so poor that you can't see these pictures, but basically it's a bunch of rich, wealthy men. Yes. Who are the most successful members of our society? Do you see Harvey Weinstein down there? Well, good. So how do you define success? Okay, there are a number of ways you could define success. In our culture, I tend to lean on, wealth, power, privilege. Now, I know we can define success in other ways, but wealth, power, and privilege, we define people who have a lot of wealth, who are powerful, and who are in a privileged position. Okay, we recognize them as the top of the heap. So when we define successful like that, this is what these people look like. So if you were to close your eyes, and in your mind's eye, if I said, what does a judge look like? What's the picture that comes to mind? You can't say Judge Judy. Okay. If I were to say, what does a lawyer look like? What does a medical doctor look like? What does a kindergarten teacher look like? Anybody in here have a male kindergarten teacher? Two people? Okay. So, we have these stereotypes or these implicit biases, which I'll get to, that shape the way that we think. If you go back to the Constitution, you can see that the founders, okay, it's a bunch of rich, wealthy men. So the question is, did they frame the Constitution in a way that knowingly or unknowingly just benefited people like themselves? When you think about who could vote, who could get an education, who could own land, it was restricted. So this was a couple hundred years ago, okay, plus, but they shaped these institutions in our culture in a way that you could maybe say makes it a little easier for some people to succeed than others. Inequality in terms of privilege and power are built into our social systems. So this last part, inequality therefore is a characteristic of society, not individual differences or abilities. If you live in the United States on a grand scale, you're among the elite in the world, right, in terms of your standard of living. How much did you do individually to attain that high social status on the planet of being in that elite category? it was just an accident of birth, right? You just happened to be born here if you were born here. And that's it. You didn't have to really do anything. So if we look at just the United States, you know, can we say the same thing for certain people in the United States? I couldn't pass that up. You cannot see it very well, but it's the Titanic sinking in modern day, and everybody's got their cell phones out as they're drowning, taking pictures of the ship going down. But the broader point I wanted to make, and this is the same image basically, but it's the Titanic going down. And people in the rowboats trying to get away. About 2,300 people on the ship, about 1,600 people died. You know, so who were the survivors? You know, those people that survived, who were they? First class passengers, there were about 329 first class passengers on that ship. 60% of all first class passengers survived. Second class passengers, about 42% survived. Third class passengers, about 25% survived. I think that first class passengers were better survivalists. I think they were better swimmers. They had lessons, right? Their privileged upbringing. Why did more first class passengers survive? They had access, right? They had a privileged position on the ship. They had access to the boats. We know that there weren't enough lifeboats for everyone. So they had the access to the boats. It wasn't their own doing that led to their survival necessarily. It was their privileged position on the ship. So, you know, the point I'm trying to make here is if we look at our society, where's that privileged position in our society? Has anyone run a marathon in here, a 26.2? All right, so there's a few of you. Night before, you've trained for a year. You're going to run this marathon. So you're eating right, you're getting rest, you're drinking lots of fluids. The next morning, you get up early. You get to the site, you're bussed to the start line. You're doing all your stretches, right? You're warming up, got your headphones on. And you find out, when you get to the start line right here, you find out that some people, unbeknownst to you, get to start right there. When that gun goes off, you start here, they start there. You also find out that some people get to start right there when that gun goes off. Some people get to start right here. Could anyone from here beat someone who got to start right there? Is that possible? It's possible. It could happen. Could anyone from here beat someone who got to start right there? It's possible. It's less likely, but it's possible. Could anyone who started right there lose to someone who started right here? It's possible. It's less, it's less likely. It's unlikely, but it could happen. You know, what if someone pulls a hamstring or something that started there, and they're going to tough it out, and they're going to walk the rest of the way? A real good runner could possibly beat them. What about someone who gets to start at the finish line? So they back up, they're exhausted, they throw up, right, after that long run. You know, I'm not using anyone from the United States, but who are these two people? Prince Harry and Prince William. You know, they were born at the finish line, right? When they were born, they had basically a guarantee that they'd have the best education, the best health care. They didn't have a whole lot to worry about. It's not a whole lot of individual ability and effort and determination that led to their privilege. So that's an obvious example, but it's not quite as clear-cut as that for us. So all of this is just trying to lay a foundation that we're a part of something much larger than just ourselves. You know, this school it's an institution that's laid out with norms and values. And when we enter this place, we all have certain roles to fulfill. I'm fulfilling the role of an instructor. Some of you are fulfilling the role of a staff person or an administrator, a dean. This place happens when we start participating in it. If we don't participate, there's nothing to this place. So we are this place, okay? We make things happen. If we make things happen, that means we can change things, okay, about this if they're not operating the way that they should be. I don't know if I'll show these little video clips or not. Maybe I should show just one of them. Let's see which one's the best one here. Maybe I'll show this one. Monopoly.
Yep, Monopoly. The game that goes on forever, flips tables, spills drinks, and ruins friendships. 20, 40, 60.
Well, I figured that might happen. Could you even see that? What happens when you play Monopoly? What kind of person do you become? Do you know anybody that won't play Monopoly because they don't like the person they become when they play Monopoly? You know, if you're greedy and you're vindictive, okay, and you go in for the kill to win the game, you're following the rules. You're doing what you're supposed to do according to the rules of Monopoly. Okay, but once you leave that game, that might not be you. You might not be greedy. We all have greed in us. That game brings it out. Okay? So, you know, there are a limitless amount of choices you can make when playing Monopoly, but there are certain paths where you follow the rules that will lead you to winning. How do you win Monopoly? You basically crush everybody else, right? Okay. So, can you think of the analogy of Monopoly as being a society? You know, and there are limitless options for us in a society. But there are these paths of least resistance that are the easiest paths to follow. And sometimes those aren't the paths that we should be following. If I just quit talking right now, because I didn't want to continue this discussion anymore, that would create a little crisis, right, in this situation. But the path of least resistance is just to keep going and finish, and then I can move on and have some lunch. If I hear a racist joke or a sexist joke, you know, it's easiest for me just to kind of smile and walk away and not say anything if I don't think it's funny. It's much more difficult to challenge that. But the path of least resistance is just to smile and move on. And that's what you can't do. You can't be complicit. So these systems are set up in such a way that we follow these paths of least resistance. 11:50. Do we have till 12:30? So I could wrap it up? Yes, wrap it up and we could have some discussion. This is a classic. It's about 2.5 minutes long. But I want you to think about paths of least resistance. Yeah, I talked to Darren beforehand. He said it is wired for sound, but let me make sure here. Can you see what this is? Do you know what this is? It's the elevator experiment from. It's the elevator experiment from Candid Camera, which was a hidden camera show years ago. Well, I said it wouldn't happen to me. I was prepared. I'm going to just move on past it. All right. How do I get the slideshow? There we go. So it was a clip that showed what happens. Has it been doing that the whole time? It hasn't changed at all? Oh my gosh, okay. Never mind. It's the elevator candid camera episode where a person walks into the elevator and they're the only one who's not in on it. All the others are. So they stand facing the back of the elevator, and that person walks in, and at first they kind of look around and they resist, but it doesn't take long before they just start going along with the rest of them and they turn around. You know, there's one where a guy walks in with a hat on, and all the others take their hat off and, like hold it over their chest at the same time. And the one guy who doesn't, who isn't in on it, he takes his hat off and puts it on his chest and looks around. It's the path of least resistance. It's so easy to follow, but when it comes to this kind of work, you can't take that path. You can't be complicit. I see it's changing on here, but not on there. So when I think of paths of least resistance, I think of, the lunch counter scene in Greensboro, North Carolina in 1960, where people decided that these lunch counters needed to be desegregated. And so they jumped off that path of least resistance and they sat at those lunch counters. 6 months later, 26 states had legislation that outlawed discrimination. Based on race, sitting at lunch counters. They made a change, so you can change these social systems. You don't have to follow the path of least resistance. So what Mary and Charles were talking about is this equity-mindedness, and I'm tying it into getting off the path of least resistance. So what does equity-mindedness mean? Equity and equality aren't the same thing, and I've got a little slide here I'll show you in a minute that explains the difference between the two. Calling attention to patterns of inequity in student outcomes. So Charles had the slide with the 32% of Latinos signing up for college classes, and then hopefully you'd have 32% completing their degree. Taking personal and institutional responsibility for the success or failure of students. I know it's on them to do the work and to pass. But again, sometimes it's more complex than that. Being race conscious and aware of the social and historical context of exclusion in higher education, critically reassessing your practices, and questioning assumptions and recognizing stereotypes that harm student success. So equality, equity, this is what you've seen, I'm sure. The one that Charles showed you was a little bit different. But equity actually involves making up for the injustices. And again, most people don't like to think that way. But that's a socially just way of leveling the playing field. So I grabbed a couple screenshots off of another presentation. But in an ideal situation, that's what you would have, right? Equity. But if the data show something like this, we can't just take that positivist approach and say, that's the data. You've got to take that critical approach. Why is this? And again, it's not easy to find the answer. University of Wisconsin professor stated, equity-mindedness asks us to turn the mirror on ourselves and accept the fact that we actually may play a pretty significant role in creating inequitable outcomes. So there are barriers that are present, but for many people, very difficult to identify, and because they seem so normalized, people continue to work with these practices, never once considering that these seemingly innocuous practices contribute to inequitable outcomes. So how do you identify those practices on a campus like this that might not be equal for everyone? So here's another one of those word clouds. And here's where it gets a little too wordy. I should have thrown a joke in here somewhere, but I'll think of one. Steve Anderson probably has one he could share with us right now. But so defining implicit bias. Let me mix it up here a little bit. Does anyone want to share what implicit bias is? What's implicit bias? If something's explicit, it's widely known, right? But if something's implicit, it's not. So what's implicit bias? Okay, a hidden framework. So is it a bias that is below our consciousness, that we don't even realize exists? You know, am I racist? Well, according to this measure, yeah, I am. I've got biases. We all have these biases. You can't find them through introspection because they're subconscious. They're there. Okay? And, you know, if we acknowledge that, that can go a long, long way. Implicit biases are pervasive. Everyone possesses them, even people with avowed commitments to impartiality, such as judges. The implicit associations we hold do not necessarily align with our declared beliefs, or even reflect stances we would explicitly endorse. We generally tend to hold implicit biases that favor our own in-group, and implicit biases are malleable. In other words, they can change. This is a great example that I've used in class from Hurricane Katrina. These pictures appeared in newspapers throughout the United States in 2005. Over on the right side, you've got two people wading through waters, and they've got bread, you know, and other goods. You've got a person over here who happens to be African American male. Same thing. He's got some food. But read the captions. On the left, a young man walks through chest-deep floodwater after looting a grocery store in New Orleans. On the right, two residents wade through chest-deep water after finding bread and soda. That's implicit bias. You know, the people who wrote those, okay, probably don't think of themselves as being racist, but that reflects a bias. Some examples here, and there are so many examples, but I thought these were pertinent because they relate to education, and they were pretty concise and clear. But examples of implicit bias. So for example, when a black student is evaluated by one black teacher and by one white teacher, the white teacher is about 30% less likely to expect that that student will complete a 4-year college degree than the black teacher. This is just that one study, not generalizing to all studies done like this. When a black student has a black teacher, that teacher is much less likely to see behavioral problems than when the same black student has a white teacher. So if a student had all black teachers, you know, the chances that they would make it through school without getting into trouble increase significantly. There's a lot of data out there on school suspensions in race right now, so it ties into that neatly. What simple actions can we take to make CLC more inclusive for all students? Consider the following choices that affect whether people feel welcome and valued or like outsiders who don't belong. Look at people when you talk to them. They seem like just simple things, but you sometimes catch yourself when talking to someone who's different. Okay, you catch yourself maybe not looking in their eyes. Smile at people when they walk into the room, make them feel welcome. This is all kind of touchy-feely stuff, isn't it? But it actually, it's legitimate. Listen and respond to what people say. Acknowledge that diversity is positive and desirable. Acknowledge people's presence. You know, do you avoid someone when they're walking down the hallway towards you if they're not like you? Invite people to your home, out to socialize, obviously under only appropriate circumstances. But take it outside of the, you know, the workforce here with people who are different from you. So what can we do everyday life? Acknowledge that implicit bias, you know, that racism exists. It's out there. When I say this, what pops into your head? Word association game. You know, what do you think of? When I do that, what pops into your head? What do you think of? You know, what's the profile? What images do you conjure up when you see subsidized housing? Or lazy? Or Harvard Law School? You know, there's implicit bias built into all of these. I still remember, boy, this was many years ago, and I'd already had my master's degree in sociology, and I remember hearing on the news, I remember hearing about a murder that had taken place, and they were trying to find the perpetrator. And I immediately had an image in my head of what that person looked like. And then I remember walking in front of the television set to look at it, and it was a guy that looked just like me. And that's not the person that I expected to see. You know, so I mean, I was upset with myself for falling into that stereotype. I just assumed it was an African-American guy. Okay? I still catch myself doing that, okay? But I work very hard at it, and I'm conscious of it. Find out as much as you can. Read, travel, you know, watch documentaries, find allies. This summer, I was in Germany. I went to Dachau, the concentration camp, and people talk about how it impacts you. And I knew it would impact me, but once you step foot inside those gates, there is this feeling that just rushes over you. It's hard to explain. Some gas chambers on the right, and then a close-up of the barbed wire fence. You know, there are photos of people trying to escape, caught in those barbed wire fences, and then they're getting shot. You know, here are the ovens. You know, I think about how this is so needless, these misunderstandings about race and ethnicity. Number 3, be mindful of your own behaviors. Do something. Take little risks. The next time you hear a racist or sexist joke, I dare you to say, I don't think that's funny. You know, when I was younger, if I had heard a sexist joke and I said, you know, I don't think that's funny, you know, the comeback would have been, what are you, gay? You know, you have to get over that kind of stuff. Okay? So next time you hear something that's offensive, you know, depending on the situation, challenge it. You know, question it. It's not funny. You'd probably be surprised at the response. Many times people will kind of say, it's not too funny. Dare to make people uncomfortable. You know, it's difficult to talk about this, but, you know, too bad. Make people uncomfortable. Be respectful, be knowledgeable. If you have to make people uncomfortable, fine. Actively promote positive change. And then one of my favorite quotes, if you're not a part of the solution, you are a part of the problem. If you're one of the people who say, I'm one of the good ones, I'm not racist, I'm not sexist. Well, if you're not doing anything, that system is continuing to operate. You're following a path of least resistance, right? And it just operates, okay? And you're complicit in it. So who's to blame? People oftentimes feel threatened, like they're pointing the finger at someone. You know, all of us are to blame. People of privilege must learn to see it, acknowledge it, must take those little risks that I was mentioning before, talking about it. You know, you have to use the words. You have to use privilege. You have to use power. You know, you have to use patriarchy. You have to talk about oppression. You've got to use those words because we know what those words mean, and you don't want to shy away from those. Be active participants in challenging it and end the luxury of obliviousness. People of privilege have this luxury where they don't have to think about privilege and power. They're just human beings, right? And they just go about their lives. Well, you know, we have to get away from thinking about just being oblivious to all this, if you actually care. Why don't dominant groups, and I'll wrap it up here, engage in eliminating the isms, you know, sexism, racism, ageism, classism, homophobia, those kinds of things? Well, some legitimately don't know that it exists. They're totally oblivious to the fact that there are some people that are privileged. They don't know, or they don't have to. They don't have to do anything. It's just an individual level problem. You know, if those people are more likely to be poor, well, it's their own problem. They should work a little bit harder. They want to safeguard their own privilege. They know dang well that they're privileged, and they want to keep that privilege. Or they don't know what to do. You know, I'd like to do something, I don't know what to do. Dominant group members oftentimes get off the hook by denying and minimizing all of these problems associated with racism, for example. It's not as bad as it used to be. You know, we're getting better. You know, we had an African-American president. So it's not, you know, we're on the right track. Blame the victim. You know, it's their own fault. It's better this way. You know, and it's always going to be this way. You can't change it. There's no use trying to fight it. It's the way it is. It doesn't count if you don't mean it. So someone has a racist joke or something and you call them on it and they say, well, I don't, you know, some of my best friends, you know, are such and such. Well, you know, that's not an excuse. Sick and tired. Every once in a while I hear people in class say I'm sick and tired about hearing, you know, about racism and sexism. You know, I'm just tired of it. So then you ask them, well, when's the last time you heard about it? Tell me that last time you heard about it. Well, I don't know. I hear about it all the time. I'm just sick and tired of hearing about it. Or I'm one of the good ones. I don't have to do anything about it because I'm one of the good ones. But again, if you're not actively doing something, you're a part of the problem. So, Scott Foster Luther King Jr. quote, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." So, you know, you can't be silent. And, you know, I didn't want to focus so much on some of the theoretical stuff in the social systems and social structure, but I tried cutting things out, and I did. But, you know, the sessions that will come up that will be more dialogue will focus on those pieces of implicit bias and what's actively going on at the school here that might make certain people feel unwelcome. So, you know, pay attention. Put yourself in someone else's shoes and look around. Not like a lot of you haven't done this before, but it'll help, you know, the discussions in these 4 sessions, I think. So, I think that's it. I've got a little bit more, but I'm gonna keep you wanting more. So you'll come to those sessions, right? Those 4 sessions. So how do you want to do this? Do you want to, yeah, for what Charles said or what Mary had said, anything at all? Let's pretend like we're just a big group of friends and we're at Perkins sitting around a table and we're just chit-chatting.